California, sunshine, beaches, Hollywood glamour. Sounds perfect, right? But underneath all that, there's a version of this state that doesn't make it onto the postcards. Dark, strange, and sometimes deeply unsettling. These are 30 chilling facts about California you were never meant to know. Fact 30. The San Andreas Fault is way overdue. The San Andreas Fault runs about 800 miles through California, and seismologists have been nervously watching it for decades. The southern section, near Los Angeles, hasn't produced a major rupture in over 300 years. The average recurrence interval for a massive quake on this stretch is somewhere between 150 and 200 years. Do the math. Scientists refer to what's coming as the big one, and they don't mean it affectionately. The USGS estimates a 7.9 magnitude or greater earthquake has roughly a 60% chance of hitting Southern California within the next 30 years. The last major rupture on the southern segment was around 1680. That's not a typo. What makes it worse is what surrounds the fault. Much of Los Angeles was built on loose sediment that behaves like liquid during a major earthquake, a process called liquefaction. Entire neighborhoods could effectively turn to jelly. Older concrete buildings, thousands of them, have been flagged for decades as structurally vulnerable, and retrofitting has been slow and piecemeal. Emergency planners estimate that a 7.8 on the southern San Andreas alone could leave 1,800 people dead, 50,000 injured, and 250,000 displaced from their homes. That's a baseline estimate, not a worst case. Fact 29. Entire towns have simply disappeared underground. In Kern County, a town called Maricopa was once a thriving oil hub, but subsidence, the gradual sinking of land caused by over-extraction of groundwater and oil, has literally caused parts of California's Central Valley to drop over 28 feet in less than a century. In some spots, the land is still sinking at over a foot per year. Infrastructure built decades ago now sits at angles it was never designed for. Roads buckle, canals tilt, and no one is entirely sure how to stop it. Fact 28. California has its own serial killer, season. Law enforcement analysts have noted that California has historically had a disproportionate number of active serial killers compared to other U.S. states. Criminologists at various universities have studied why. The transient population, the sprawling geography, the anonymity of major cities, and the sheer volume of runaways and drifters who pass through the state. At one point in the 1970s and 1980s, California was simultaneously home to multiple active serial killers operating at the same time, unbeknownst to each other and to police. The Zodiac Killer was never caught. The Golden State Killer murdered at least 13 people and assaulted dozens more over more than a decade before being identified through genealogical DNA in 2018, decades after the crimes. The Hillside Stranglers, the Freeway Killer, the Doodler, Herbert Mullen, Edmund Kemper. The list from just the 1970s alone is staggering. Forensic experts have long pointed to California's combination of geographic sprawl and underfunded interagency communication as factors that allowed killers to evade detection for years. Some of them are still unidentified. Fact 27. The Salton Sea is an ecological disaster in slow motion. The Salton Sea was created entirely by accident in 1905 when an irrigation canal broke and flooded a desert basin for 2 years. For a while, it was actually a resort destination, the California Riviera, they called it. But the water has no outlet. Over decades, it became increasingly saline and toxic. Fish died by the millions, birds followed. Today, the shoreline is crusted with the bones of tilapia and the stench of hydrogen sulfide. As the water recedes, it exposes a lakebed full of agricultural pesticides and selenium, which blows as toxic dust across communities in the Coachella Valley. The state has known about it for years. The full restoration plan remains largely unfunded. The communities around the southern end of the Salton Sea, places like Mecca and Thermal, are among the most environmentally burdened zip codes in California. Childhood asthma rates there are among the highest in the state. Studies have linked the airborne dust from the retreating lakebed to measurable respiratory harm. State officials have made pledges and produced timelines for decades. Meanwhile, the sea shrinks by roughly 1 foot per year. and the exposed playa keeps growing. Fact 26. California's gold rush was built on mass atrocity. The gold rush of 1848 is taught in schools as a story of ambition and opportunity. What gets skipped over is the near extermination of California's indigenous population that followed. In 1850, the first governor of California, Peter Hardeman Burnett, openly called for a war of extermination against native peoples in his state address. Between 1846 and 1873, the native California population dropped from an estimated 150,000 to fewer than 30,000, killed by violence, disease, forced labor, and starvation. Some historians call it genocide. The federal government, for its part, spent years trying to officially acknowledge it. The state of California itself funded many of these killings. Between 1850 and 1859, the state government reimbursed private militias for expeditions against native communities, essentially paying people to kill. In 2019, California Governor Gavin Newsom formally issued a state apology to Native Americans for the genocide, becoming the first California governor to use that word officially. It was 170 years after the killings began. The 18 treaties the federal government negotiated with California tribes in the early 1850s, promising land in exchange for peace, were never ratified by the U.S. Senate. They were kept secret for 50 years. Fact 25, there are over 10,000 abandoned mine shafts in California. The gold rush left behind more than history books. California is riddled with over 47,000 abandoned mine features, shafts, adits, tunnels, many of them unmapped and unfenced. The Bureau of Land Management estimates that around 10,000 of these are considered hazardous. Hikers fall into them. Some have never been recovered. In remote areas of the Sierra Nevada and the Mojave Desert, these shafts can drop hundreds of feet straight down with no warning markers. A pleasant day hike can end very badly, and nobody would know where to look. Fact 24. The Big Dry. California's mega droughts are ancient and brutal. Scientists studying tree rings and sediment cores from California lake beds have found evidence of mega droughts that lasted not years, but centuries. One drought that hit the region around 900 to 1100 AD lasted roughly 200 years. Another in the 1200s lasted about 150 years. The current infrastructure of California, its reservoirs, its agriculture, its 39 million residents, was all built around water availability patterns from the 20th century, which was, by historical standards, an unusually wet period. Researchers at the University of Minnesota have described the current era as potentially the beginning of another mega drought cycle, amplified by climate change. Fact 23. Death Valley holds records that defy human survival. Death Valley is not just the hottest place in the United States, it's the hottest place ever officially recorded on Earth. On July 10, 1913, Furnace Creek hit 134 degrees Fahrenheit, 56.7 degrees Celsius. In summer, ground temperatures regularly exceed 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The valley sits 282 feet below sea level, making it the lowest point in North America. At those temperatures, a person without water can die within hours. Search and rescue teams in the area regularly recover the bodies of tourists who underestimated the conditions. Many of them found just a short distance from their vehicles. The Park Service posts signs, sends warnings, and closes certain trails during peak summer. People ignore them every year. In 2021, Death Valley briefly reached 130 degrees Fahrenheit, the hottest temperature reliably recorded anywhere on Earth in over a century. Remarkably, the park still drew visitors during that heat wave. Rangers have described pulling over tourists who had exited their cars in direct sun with no water in 120-degree heat, apparently believing a national park designation offered some kind of protection from basic physics. It does not. The desert is indifferent to how far you drove to get there. Fact 22. Los Angeles was built on a river that no longer exists as a river. The Los Angeles River was once a wild, seasonal river that flooded regularly and shaped the entire geography of the LA basin. After catastrophic floods in the 1930s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers encased nearly all 51 miles of it in concrete turning a living waterway into a drainage channel. Today it looks like the backdrop of a car chase scene, which it frequently is. The irony is that the concrete solution actually increased flood risk in some areas by speeding up the flow. The cost of restoring even a portion of it has been estimated in the billions. Fact 21. California's prison system once held more people than most countries. At its peak in 2006, California's prison system housed nearly 174,000 inmates, operating at nearly double its designed capacity. The overcrowding was so severe that in 2011, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that conditions in California prisons constituted cruel and unusual punishment, violating the Eighth Amendment. Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote in the majority opinion that the conditions were incompatible with the concept of human dignity. Medical and mental health care were so inadequate that courts found the state was essentially condemning inmates to preventable deaths. Fact 20. The mysterious disappearances. Along the Highway of Tears have a California cousin. Northern California's Highway 36 and the stretches of Route 299 cutting through Humboldt County have quietly accumulated a disturbing number of missing persons cases over the decades. The dense redwood forests and remote terrain make the region difficult to search. Humboldt County consistently ranks among the highest per capita for missing persons in the entire state. Locals have long known that people go into those woods and simply don't come back. Law enforcement has historically been underfunded in those areas, and many cases remain open indefinitely. Fact 19. Chevron's Richmond refinery has been exploding since 1989. The Chevron refinery in Richmond, California, has been the site of repeated fires, explosions, and toxic releases over the decades. The 2012 fire sent a massive cloud of toxic smoke over the Bay Area and sent more than 15,000 people to hospitals and clinics. A 1999 explosion killed 4 workers. Community advocates in Richmond, a predominantly working-class city, have pointed out for years that the surrounding neighborhoods bear a disproportionate environmental health burden. As of recent reports, the facility continues to operate. Fact 18. California has a sinkhole problem that gets very little attention. While Florida gets all the sinkhole press, California has its own version of the problem, and it's getting worse. In 2016, a massive sinkhole opened on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. In 2022, sinkholes swallowed sections of roads in San Jose and Sacramento. The cause is largely the same as the subsidence issue in the Central Valley. Underground aquifers that have been overpumped collapse, and the ground above drops suddenly. As drought pushes water tables lower, engineers warn the frequency of these collapses will increase. Fact 17. The San Onofre nuclear plant sits on an active fault. The San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station in San Diego County was shut down in 2013 following a radioactive leak from a steam generator. What drew less attention was the fact that it had been operating for decades directly adjacent to the Cristianitos Fault, a known active fault. Additionally, the spent nuclear fuel, highly radioactive waste, remains stored on site in above-ground canisters, sitting just feet from the Pacific Ocean. The canisters are expected to remain there for decades because there is still no permanent storage solution for nuclear waste in the United States. Fact 16. California's wildfires are prehistoric and getting angrier. Paleofire research, the study of ancient fires through charcoal layers in the soil, shows that California has always burned. It burned before humans, and it burned with indigenous burning practices for thousands of years. But the intensity of modern fires is different. The Camp Fire in 2018 destroyed the town of Paradise in under 4 hours, killing 85 people. It was the deadliest wildfire in California history. The Dixie Fire in 2021 burned over 960,000 acres, the second largest in state history. Climate scientists note that fire seasons are now essentially year-round. The word season has become a formality. In January 2025, the Palisades and Eaton fires tore through the Los Angeles area simultaneously, burning during a time of year that once would have been considered off-season. Neighborhoods in Pacific Palisades and Altadena were destroyed within hours. The fires burned in areas that had not seen significant fire in decades, meaning fuel loads were massive. Over 12,000 structures were lost across both fires. Hydrants ran dry in some areas as demand overwhelmed the water system. The fires happened just weeks into the new year. Insurance companies had already been pulling out of California for years before any of it started. Fact 15. There are hundreds of unmapped fault lines in urban areas. The Rose Canyon Fault runs directly beneath downtown San Diego and has buildings, hospitals, and freeways sitting on top of it. It wasn't formally mapped as a significant hazard until the late 1990s. Geological mapping of active faults in California's urban areas remains incomplete. The Alquist-Priolo Act of 1972 prohibits building on top of known active faults, but you can only regulate what's been mapped. Engineers estimate that many faults beneath California's cities simply haven't been found yet. They'll be found the hard way. Fact 14. The city of Palmdale is slowly moving towards San Francisco. This is not a metaphor. The section of the Mojave Desert that Palmdale sits on is on the Pacific Plate, the tectonic plate that grinds northward along the San Andreas Fault. Over millions of years, Los Angeles will effectively merge with San Francisco. Right now, the two plates are moving at about 2 inches per year. It's the kind of geological fact that sounds almost calming, until you remember that movement is never smooth. The slow creep is punctuated by sudden, violent lurches. That's what an earthquake is. Fact 13. California once tried to legally split into multiple states. It's happened more than once as a serious political effort. In 2018, a Silicon Valley venture capitalist named Tim Draper collected enough signatures to get a measure on the California ballot that would have divided the state into 3 separate entities. The California Supreme Court struck it from the ballot before the vote. Before that, a similar initiative in 2014 proposed 6 Californias. And before that, going back to the 1850s, there were repeated efforts to separate Northern and Southern California. The frustrations driving these movements are real. The logistics of actually doing it remain a bureaucratic and constitutional nightmare. Fact 12. The Los Angeles Aqueduct was built on deception. In the early 1900s, Los Angeles was running out of water. City officials, led by engineer William Mulholland and Mayor Fred Eaton, secretly purchased land and water rights in the Owens Valley, lying to farmers about their intentions. By the time the Owens Valley residents understood what was happening, the aqueduct was already under construction. The water was diverted 233 miles south to Los Angeles. The Owens Valley, once a fertile farming region, was transformed into near desert. In 1924 and 1927, angry farmers dynamited sections of the aqueduct in protest. Mulholland's name is still on a famous Los Angeles drive. The story was later the loose basis for the 1974 film Chinatown, though the actual history is arguably darker than the movie. By the 1930s, Los Angeles had effectively drained Owens Lake entirely. The dry lakebed became one of the largest sources of particulate dust pollution in the United States, creating respiratory health problems for communities downwind for decades. The city was eventually required to fund water restoration efforts on the lakebed. The cost to partially suppress the dust has run into the hundreds of millions. Mulholland Drive still gets a lot of traffic. The Owens Valley is still trying to recover. Fact 11. There is a town in California that has been on fire underground for decades. The town of Centralia in Pennsylvania is the famous case, but California has its own version. In the abandoned coal mining regions of the San Joaquin Valley, underground coal seams have caught fire and burned for years, in some cases decades. These fires are nearly impossible to extinguish and release carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide into the soil above. In some locations, the ground is warm to the touch. Vegetation dies in circular patches. And in most cases, the fires simply continue to burn because the cost of intervention exceeds any practical benefit. Fact 10. California's foster care system has a chronic aging out crisis. Each year, thousands of young people in California age out of the foster care system when they turn 18, without permanent families, stable housing, or sufficient support. Studies by the California Child Welfare Indicators Project have found that former foster youth in California are disproportionately represented in the homeless population, the prison population, and among victims of trafficking. In 2019, roughly 4,000 young people aged out of the California system in a single year. Despite being one of the wealthiest states in the wealthiest country in the world, the state has struggled to solve a problem that is, on paper, entirely solvable. Fact 9. The remains of over 200 shipwrecks lie off the California coast. California's coastline holds the graves of at least 200 documented shipwrecks, though the true number is likely far higher. The Point Reyes and Point Conception areas, where strong currents and coastal fog made navigation treacherous, account for dozens of them. Some wrecks from the Gold Rush era still hold cargo. Divers have found entire ships buried under sand, perfectly preserved in the cold water. The SS City of Rio de Janeiro sank in 1901 at the entrance to San Francisco Bay, killing 128 people, including the U.S. Consul General to Japan. The wreck has never been fully recovered. Fact 8. California has had at least 3 100-year floods in 30 years. The concept of a 100-year flood means an event that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. California has had major flood events of that classification in 1986, 1997, 2017, and again in 2023, when atmospheric rivers dropped historic rainfall across the state in a matter of weeks. Scientists point out that the label is deeply misleading to the public. It doesn't mean a flood happens once per century. It means the statistical probability. And as precipitation patterns shift, that probability is being recalculated upward. Fact 7. The Channel Islands were home to a race of dwarf mammoths. Off the coast of Santa Barbara, on the Channel Islands, paleontologists have found the remains of Mammuthus exilis, the pygmy mammoth. These animals evolved to be significantly smaller than their mainland relatives due to the limited resources of island life. They roamed the islands for tens of thousands of years before going extinct roughly 13,000 years ago. Around the time humans arrived in the region, the largest specimens stood about 4.5 feet tall. They are among the most unusual large mammals ever found in North America, and most Californians have never heard of them. Fact 6. California's air quality has caused measurable cognitive damage in children. Long-term studies conducted in Southern California, including a landmark USC study tracking children in the Los Angeles and San Bernardino areas, found that children living in high-pollution areas showed measurable deficits in lung development, brain development, and cognitive function compared to children in cleaner air environments. Fine particulate matter, PM 2.5, from traffic, industry, and wildfire. Smoke crosses the blood-brain barrier. The communities most exposed are, predictably, lower-income neighborhoods near freeways, refineries, and industrial corridors. California has stronger air quality regulations than most states. They have not been enough. Fact 5. The Hotel Cecil in Los Angeles has a death rate that defies probability. The Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles opened in 1927 and has been the site of more suspicious deaths, suicides, and disappearances than almost any other building in the country. At least 16 deaths have been documented within the hotel over its history. Serial killers Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger both stayed there, separately, while actively killing. Elisa Lam's 2013 disappearance and death in the hotel's rooftop water tank, captured on a disturbing surveillance video, brought international attention to the building. The hotel was rebranded, renovated, and reopened. The address has not changed. The Cecil was originally built during the era when downtown Los Angeles was a bustling urban center, with the ambition of attracting middle-class business travelers. Instead, it attracted tragedy from its earliest years. The first recorded suicide there happened in 1931, just 4 years after it opened. The building's location on the edge of Skid Row contributed to its decline and to the steady accumulation of desperate and vulnerable guests. Guests of the hotel reportedly complained for days about the water pressure and the taste of the tap water before anyone checked the roof tanks. Elisa Lam had been missing for 3 weeks. Fact 4. California's aquifer systems are collapsing in a way that cannot be reversed. When aquifers, underground water-bearing rock formations, are pumped too aggressively, the clay layers within them compact permanently. This is called irreversible subsidence, and it has destroyed a significant portion of California's underground water storage capacity forever. The USGS has documented permanent loss of aquifer storage capacity in the Central Valley at a scale of tens of millions of acre-feet. Once those clay layers collapse, no amount of water can refill that storage space. It's gone. California's water future is being mortgaged against the water needs of today's agriculture, and the loan can never be repaid. Fact 3. The town of Bombay Beach on the Salton Sea is one of the poorest communities in California. While the Salton Sea attracts artists and photographers documenting its eerie, apocalyptic beauty, the people actually living beside it have been largely forgotten. Bombay Beach has a population of fewer than 400 people, a median household income that falls well below the state poverty line, and a landscape dotted with abandoned trailers, crumbling concrete, and dead fish. The town has occasionally been colonized by the art world as a canvas for large-scale installations. The residents, many of them elderly, many of them with nowhere else to go, live there permanently, breathing air that is, by EPA standards, periodically hazardous. Fact 2. California is home to the world's oldest and tallest living trees, and we're losing them. The ancient bristlecone pines of the White Mountains in eastern California include Methuselah, a tree that is over 4,800 years old, making it the oldest known living individual organism on Earth. Its exact location is kept secret by the U.S. Forest Service to protect it from vandalism. Meanwhile, the giant sequoias of the Sierra Nevada, the largest trees by volume on Earth, are dying in wildfires at rates that alarm scientists. In 2020 and 2021 alone, an estimated 10 to 20% of all large mature sequoias on Earth burned in California wildfires, trees that survived thousands of years, gone in a single fire season. The Castle Fire of 2020 killed an estimated 10,000 to 11,200 large sequoias in a single event, more than had been recorded killed by wildfire in all of documented history combined. Sequoias evolved to survive and even benefit from low-intensity fire, which opens their cones and clears competition. But the fires now burning through the Sierra Nevada are not low intensity. They are catastrophically hot, driven by decades of drought, dead wood accumulation, and rising temperatures. Some groves that have stood since before the Roman Empire are now gone. The National Park Service has been attempting emergency seeding and planting programs. The scale of what's been lost makes the effort feel very small. Fact 1. California has the highest number of homeless residents of any state in the nation, by a wide margin. California accounts for roughly 28% of the entire U.S. homeless population, despite being home to only about 12% of the country's total residents. As of the most recent federal count, over 180,000 people in California are homeless on any given night. Los Angeles and San Francisco consistently rank among the worst cities in the country for visible homelessness. The state spends more money per capita on homeless services than nearly any other state. The numbers keep going up. Former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown once said plainly, "We have spent hundreds of millions of dollars and the problem has not gotten better." It has not. California is extraordinary, in ways the Tourism Board will never put in a brochure. It's a place of staggering beauty and staggering contradictions. The same state that gave the world Silicon Valley and the film industry is also slowly sinking, burning, drying out, and haunted by a history it's still sorting through. It has the oldest living trees and some of the most toxic air. It generates more wealth than most countries and still can't house its most vulnerable residents. Every single fact in this video is documented, verifiable, and largely absent from the conversations happening in Sacramento. If you made it through all 30 of these, you now know things about California that most people in California don't. If you found this interesting, hit like and subscribe. More of these are coming, and you're probably going to want to watch them.